here today to chat a little bit about my experience judging the Booktube Prize Octofinals round. I've been assigned Nonfiction Group G, and I have the Memoir category because of the 6 books that I've been assigned this round, 5 of them are memoirs. So there's that. So these are the books. Stay True, Manifesto, In Love, Dinners with Ruth, Solito, all of those are memoirs, and Buster Keaton, A Filmmaker's Life. So 5 memoirs, and I'm going to try not to just compare these books to each other. I mean, that is what you're doing when you're judging the prize. But I'm going to try to let each of these books shine through, regardless of the fact that they're all memoirs. All these 5, I'm going to try to judge them just as books. So I finished the first one, so we're going to chat about that today. Manifesto by Bernardine Evaristo. She's the first Black woman to have won the Booker Prize. She won in 2019. It was the same year that Margaret Atwood won the prize, but that's another story. She mentions it in here very gracefully. She talks about her accomplishment as a writer. But before that, a big part of the book is centered on her life growing up as a Black British woman, daughter of immigrants. Her father's from Nigeria, and even his parents. His father was a migrant from Brazil, some of those people who had been emancipated after slavery and moved back to Africa, to the mainland. And her mother is Irish, and so she talks about growing up in Britain, in an interracial family, and experiencing prejudice as a young person, but also about the choices that she made for her life, living an alternate lifestyle to some extent. Like, she wasn't, I guess, doing a lot of the things that other people were doing, but the choices that she made and where they've taken her. Her decision to become a writer and what that experience has been like, a little bit of the backstory of the books that she has written and how she came to writing them, like what was her motivation. I love the fact that she talks about her relationship and her changing identity, that in her youth she was attracted to boys, and in her 20s she lived as a lesbian, and then in her 30s she re-emerged as heterosexual and married a man, and they've been living happily ever after, I guess. I don't know. She doesn't go into a lot of detail about her life with her husband, at least not the same kind of detail that she went into with the relationships that she had with women in her youth, and I found that to be fascinating. But the ending of the book, the latter part of the book, focuses on her activism as a Black woman founding a prize that celebrates poets from Africa. And the prize, she notes it, I don't remember the name right now, but I found that fascinating, that someone who has had the life story that she has had thus far, centering on one part of her life, one part of her experience, a place where she can make a difference, and using that. So I love that. I love her manifesto in the end. I wish that part of the book was more intensive and extensive. So I like this book. I like this book a lot, but I feel like it's not going to be my favorite of the round. I don't know. But it is the book to top because it's my first book that I finished. So I finished Stay True, and because I didn't read the book synopsis, I didn't know what the book was going to be about. I like to experience books organically. So I read this and I wasn't sure how much I liked it. Like, I liked the book fine. I just wasn't sure that I understood the point or the reason for the book. So the author is staff writer at the New Yorker, but most of this is set in the 1990s, and we're reading about his experience in college in California in the 1990s. And so this feels a little bit like a time capsule of the 1990s, just experiencing what life was like, especially for a young man who's the son of immigrants and someone who's immersing into American culture. We learn about him just like having this passion for music, 1990s music. So being a fan of Kurt Cobain and loving Smells Like Teen Spirit, that kind of thing. Just loving records and the record store experience, and creating zines to share his passion with the world. Like, I really like that. I feel like we got a chance to re-immerse in this culture alongside this author while we're reading his memoir. He's the son of Taiwanese immigrants, and for a big part of his life, his father had gone back to Taiwan, and they were corresponding via fax. So he talks about like using the time difference so that he could come home from school and have homework that he wants his father to help him with, and he could fax it to Taiwan, and his dad could work on it and respond, and he would have the response so he could go to school the next morning, that kind of thing. I like that this book just shares the experience of living in this time. The book has these pictures printed in it, kind of like a zine, and he does record the fact that, you know, sometimes you just take pictures of random things because you needed to finish a film roll. But pictures were kind of rare, like it wasn't like the digital age now. So I really liked the experience of living through the 90s again with this author. He talked about the birth of email culture and how as a group he and his college roommates would check emails as a group like once a week, you know, just making comparison between then and now. But the book also centers on a relationship that is very significant to him and what happened to him after he lost that relationship. So I don't want to give you too much about the story, but that happens like this, the second 2/3 of the book in, or the second half of the book in. And because I didn't know what the book was going to be about in the beginning, I felt like there were parts of this that rambled. So I like this a lot, but I don't think this is going to be the strongest book for me in this round, so I'm done. But then I read In Love by Amy Bloom, and Amy Bloom is an author, but this is her memoir of love and loss, and in this one she is focusing on her life with her husband, remembering the life with her husband because she lost him to Alzheimer's. So there are some difficult parts of this book, and I know that this is also not a book that everyone is going to want to read because there are some difficult choices in here. The author and her husband had to deal with his diagnosis, early onset. Yes, baby? They're not sitting down, so maybe you let them lie down in there then. If they can't stand up, let them lie down. Okay? So part of this is her and her husband getting his diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's and how they decide to move forward. A little bit about the loss of cognitive function and memories with the progress of Alzheimer's, and how a person chooses to live or not when they receive this diagnosis. This was beautifully done because Amy Bloom takes you through the memories. Like the book happens in waves, so we start towards the end of the story. The book starts, the first entry is set in Zurich, Switzerland in January 2020. And I won't tell you, but maybe you could figure it out. The book is set in Switzerland. Someone who has a terrible diagnosis. And yeah, like I said, not everyone is going to want to read this book because of the choices that this couple make. It came off? Okay. Alright, so can you fix it? I like this. I really like this book. I like how the author portrays the positives and the negatives. She shares the good and the bad of her husband. Like, she's pretty real in how she portrays him, so I feel like the reader gets a chance to really know who her husband was before he became diminished. Like, she shares a little bit about his history because he played football at Yale College, and a little bit of how his life has been shaped by that. She shares who her husband was. Like, no one is a saint, but she talks about his work in the big part, in the fullness of his life. He worked as an escort for women who wanted to get services at Planned Parenthood but would have been prevented by protesters. How he was one of those big guys who helped to escort women through the stuff. There's a lot in this book that I really loved. Feel like the author really did a good job of sharing the emotional turmoil, the highs and the lows of her experiences. And so yeah, really like this book. So one of my top contenders at this point. And then just today I finished Solito by Javier Zamora. Javier Zamora grew up and spent the first 9 years of his life in El Salvador, and his parents had moved to the United States, and so it is about his trying to make the trip from El Salvador through Guatemala through Mexico to reunite with his parents in La USA, as they call it. So a young boy traveling as an undocumented illegal immigrant at 9 years old through South America, trying to meet up with family. And man, I feel like this book was just necessary. Like, there's a blurb here. Sandra Cisneros says, I have waited decades for a memoir like Solito. I think this book was necessary. My caveat about the book is that the author is 28 when he's writing it, so 19 years have passed since his experience as a 9-year-old immigrant trying to cross the border. And so I wonder how much of the book is his actual memory and how much of it is, I don't know if you'd call it fictionalization. I don't know. So I really liked it. Yes, Pumpkin, you want to say hi to the people? You're getting so big for these videos. Hi. We're going back out so you could keep on your stuff. I love you. You eating your animal crackers? Okay, I'll soon come, alright? A couple of things that I learned in reading this book is that there are barriers that are not just a barrier between Mexico and the United States. Like someone who's traveling from the lower reaches of South America trying to reach the border to the United States has lots of other barriers that they must traverse. So the book starts with Javier Zamora being in El Salvador and his family making contact with his parents who are living in the United States, and also making contact with the coyotes, the men who will help to shepherd them on this trip, and how it's not as simple as you say, okay, I want to make the trek. The person, the coyote, has to accept you, and what that process is like, the waiting and the uncertainty, and what those barriers for the transport could be. Like he says, as a kid he got cavities and they said, no, you can't have cavities if you're going to take this trip. The other thing is that in various parts of South America, people speak differently. They have different words that they call the same object. So their accents may be a little different. The words that they use may be a little different, and the people themselves look different. So he said along the way there are lots of people who would probably try to capitalize on someone who they suspect of trying to make that illegal trek. And so, you know, there's the fear that someone may hear about your plans and turn you into the authorities, whether in your native country or as you travel through Guatemala, through Mexico, thereabouts. And so a lot of the book centers on that fear and trying to make the journey regardless what the journey would be like, dealing with all those things, all those barriers, long before you get to the Mexico-United States border.
Mommy, I want to do my
So I loved it. Okay, so you want a pen? Okay. So I love this. I love this. I'm not sure how I'm going to reconcile my concern about the fact that 19 years passed between the time this happened and the time it's being written down, especially considering that at the end of the book, the author talks about not having spoken much about his experience right after it finished, right after this whole experience ended. So I don't know. I like this a lot, but we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see how it compares to the others. But I finished this book, and this book is brilliant. At this point, I feel like this is my #1 book. Dinners with Ruth, a memoir on the power of friendships by Nina Tottenberg. Nina Tottenberg started off as a court reporter for the Supreme Court, and this encapsulates the rise in her career as she works with NPR and the friendships that she developed with other women in the media, but more so focusing on her relationship that started and burgeoned with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as well as other relationships that RBG had with just other people. Nina Tottenberg talked about how in the beginning of her career, she needed to learn a little bit more about the dynamics of the Supreme Court rulings, and she reached out to RBG 20 years before RBG went on the bench, and they developed a friendship that saw RBG's career arc also landing her on the bench. And so their friendship grew, but also RBG's friendships with other people grew, and it's all captured here. So I loved it. This book, I feel like, is brilliant. What is it? What is it? What? Hi. Hi. What happened? I love you. Alright, go do your homework. Ask me to do homework. We're gonna go in the car and go to the store later, okay?
Go to the store.
Yeah, we're gonna go to the store so I could go buy something to cook for dinner.
The Cheez-Its?
And Cheez-Its, yeah.
What?
Go do your homework. I soon come. Tottenberg in this book traces not just RBG's career arc, she also focuses on how RBG worked to ease the prejudice that was being faced by women in the 1970s. And who knows, without RBG's legacy, whether some of those things might still have been happening. So I love this book. I felt like it was brilliant. And at this point, I feel like this is my #1 book, but still a little bit up in the air because, man, a lot of things could happen between now and me finishing this round. This is a really great book. Buster Keaton, A Filmmaker's Life by James Curtis. This is a really good book, but I feel like it's a little difficult to judge it alongside this book and this book and this book and this book, and Manifesto, Bernardine Evaristo. So all of these plus Manifesto are memoirs, and this is a very well researched biography of Buster Keaton's life. James Curtis goes into the life of Buster Keaton's parents, who were performers as well, and with whom Buster Keaton got his start in performing because his parents had an act. They traveled with a traveling troupe, and so when he was a baby, they had an act. The Three Keatons, it was called. So he got an early start in performing, and that was what he grew up doing. So when I say James Curtis portrays his entire life, I mean his life as an early performer, but also about his parents meeting in the show and courting, and what his parents and his grandparents or his grandfathers did, moving to Oklahoma, getting a homestead, and all of that. Like, it's all here. So this is a really, really dense read because it is the entirety of a man's life, but also a society and a culture in the United States around this time. But for someone like me who doesn't have a lot of knowledge of Buster Keaton, I don't know how interested everyone would be in reading almost 700 pages of text. So if you're unsure about whether or not this is a book for you, maybe the fact that we can compare what cinema and what movies and what just visual representation was in the time when Buster Keaton was acting, and what we do now. Like, we're all actors here on YouTube, right? Because things are not always as they seem on YouTube, in YouTube videos. I try to be real, but not everyone is, and that's fine. We're all here to be entertained. And so just kind of comparing entertainment from Buster's era to now, it makes it a really interesting read, but it's also a really dense one. So I don't know how accessible this book is to everyone. Took me a really long time to get through it. So yeah, I like this a lot, but it's not going to be my top book just because I feel like it's not as accessible as the other books that were shorter and just more readable. And I think that has to be accounted for in judging this prize. because it's Booktube, right? It's Booktube prize. So which book would I most likely recommend to you to pick up? It wouldn't be this, because I think this is more of a niche read, kind of. I don't know. So just kind of thinking about my 6 books, and I'm going to add another book here, turn it inside out, just because I no longer have one of the books. So these are my 6 books. Let's pretend that these are my 6 books. Here's how I will rank them. I think this is my number 1 book, Dinners with Ruth, because I feel like Nina Tottenberg as a journalist really centers on the important story, and so we get a lot of her relationship with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but we also get her relationship with other Supreme Court justices. She was very close friends with Antonin Scalia, and she also explores the relationship between Ginsburg and Scalia, who were very different in their political views, but seemed like at all points were just very friendly. They could look past their differences and still be friends. And I feel like Tottenberg really transports the reader into the Washington culture in this book. I feel like it's really immersive, and I really liked it. I think my second book, these two, I'm not so sure. I'm still not so sure. I think I'm leaning towards In Love by Amy Bloom being my second book. No. I think I'm saying Solito is my second. I think Solito gets my second place vote, because it's really good. Like, it's a really well written story. Again, not positive that it's complete memoir, narrative nonfiction. I don't know what to call this, but I'm saying this is my second book because I really liked it, and I have no hesitation with recommending it to you. And so on that basis, I'm saying this one. This may be a little bit more polarizing just because of the decisions that the people make in this book, but I really felt like this was a fantastic read. Amy Bloom, again, a writer, and she transmits the emotion and the decision of how to deal with a progressing disease, and a person's right to choose how they want to live their life. These are my top 3 books. I'm a little stunned, but I'm gonna say, yeah. So Manifesto, I'm gonna say this is my number 4 book. Buster Keaton is number 4. Manifesto, which is my stand-in right here, is number 5. And Stay True is number 6. And I'm going to just post my ballots right now so I don't change my mind later, because I feel like this could just like completely reverse and everything would be different. But yeah, those are my rankings. So hope you enjoyed this video. I've been reading these books for 2 months. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Maybe I'll chat a little bit more about these books in another video, because I feel like I have more thoughts that I didn't share here. But so yeah, we'll talk there. If you were judging the Booktube prize, let me know. Send me a link with your video so I can go watch it, or let me know that you have it up so I can go see it. And if you've read any of these, let me know if you have different thoughts, if you would rank the books differently. I know Alba was also reading this round, so I'm really looking forward to hearing Alba's rankings. And if you were also reading for this round, we'd love to hear your rankings as well. So yeah, let's chat in the comments down below, and until we come back for another video, happy reading, bye.